From The Australian, here's What's on the Front. I'm Kristen Amiot. It's Thursday, January 23. Penny Wong met with her US counterpart, the newly installed Secretary of State Marco Rubio, on Tuesday.
Obviously, it's been a great day. It's been a day of productive meetings, a fantastic opportunity for Australia's Foreign Minister to be here on the first full day of the Trump administration. And, we begin the work we will do together to deliver for the Australian people and for the American people alike.
It follows the Foreign Minister's attendance at the inauguration of President Donald Trump. You can read all the latest developments from the new Trump administration right now at theaustralian.com.au. The boss of the Australian Federal Police says foreign actors could be paying local criminals to perpetrate anti-Semitic attacks. But inquiries by The Australian show the cops could be barking up the wrong tree. That's today's episode. Late night in Newtown. The streets of the bustling inner-city suburb are uncharacteristically quiet as two men in hoods move towards a synagogue on Georgina Street. On a brick fence surrounding the darkened place of worship, they draw a Nazi symbol with thick black spray paint. Then another, and another. What follows is a clear fluid slopped onto the synagogue's gleaming white walls. The men's attempts to ignite the building ultimately fail, but the hateful vandalism remains. On Wednesday, there were consequences.
The man has been charged after an alleged attempt to set a synagogue on fire in Newtown earlier last month.
A second man is still yet to be arrested, but we expect to make an arrest shortly and he will also be before the court.
Adam Moule appeared in court, where he was charged with multiple offences, including destroying property using fire and stolen goods. He's the 9th person to be charged by a dedicated strike force as anti-Semitic attacks ratchet up across Australia's major cities. And police say the perpetrators may be motivated and funded by foreign actors.
We believe criminals for hire may be behind some incidents. So part of our inquiries include who is paying those criminals, where those people are, whether they are in Australia or offshore, and what their motivation is.
On Monday, Australian Federal Police Commissioner Rhys Kershaw said the local criminals who launch anti-Semitic attacks could be on the payrolls of people far from our shores.
It is important we share this information with the public so they understand how seriously the AFP is taking this investigation and to explain why there will be lengthy investigations.
The AFP boss briefed a National Cabinet meeting convened by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese on Tuesday.
Well, the substance of a statement that Mr Kershaw put out yesterday was that anti-Semitism is on the rise.
Greg Brown is the Australian's Canberra Bureau Chief.
And he said it was something authorities were taking very seriously, and there are 166 cases that have been referred to them. There were 15 serious investigations. The one thing the AFP are dealing with at the moment is that it's difficult to get to the bottom of who might be commissioning a particular crime because they're all using highly sophisticated networks, encrypted devices, things that can make it very difficult to ascertain the identity of someone. Within this, there's obviously concern that people are being radicalised, including young people, through online content. But he did raise this idea that they were looking into, was what he said, whether overseas actors or individuals have paid local criminals in Australia to carry out some of these crimes in our suburbs. He left it open about whether it could be a criminal from overseas, could it be a state actor like someone who had connections to the Iran government, for example, Could it be someone with connections to Hezbollah or Hamas? He left this completely open, and this obviously led to a political firestorm with the coalition demanding more answers.
Well, it's a gravely serious claim for the Australian Federal Police to make, and I think the Australian people are entitled to more information from the Prime Minister today about what he knows about this, when he was briefed about it, and what action the government is taking about it.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, under pressure to defend the government from accusations it's been slow to act on Australia's growing anti-Semitism problem, said Kershaw's comments were made in hopes of increasing transparency around the AFP's investigation. The thing is, it could all be for naught.
There's actually no intelligence to suggest that any of these attacks had been funded by overseas criminals. None. There is a suggestion that the people have been paid, but the more likely outcome, according to intelligence officials, is that this has actually been funded by local criminal gangs. Now, the reason why the foreign actors is being investigated, because this has been part of the landscape for the last few years, where Kershaw was saying 70% of payments that go to criminals come from overseas. So they're logically looking overseas as well.
If indeed the intention of making this announcement about potential foreign actors was about transparency, why put it out there without absolutely rock-solid backing and intelligence?
It's hard to justify it was about transparency when there's no more information available. So it's interesting that this has been raised when the intelligence at the moment doesn't actually support it. It's more part of their investigation because it is a part of the crime landscape, and it has been for the past few years. Normally, the police and the intelligence agencies are sort of above politics, but the fact that Kershaw is now front and centre of a pretty tough political debate, I don't think is where he would have wanted to be.
Coming up, what Australia's Jewish leaders want from the government and from law enforcement. While I've got you, I wanted to let you know about a very special live event we're hosting in February. The Australian's national chief correspondent and creator of our Bronwyn investigative podcast series, Hedley Thomas, will sit down with national crime correspondent David Murray and editorial director Claire Harvey on February 27 in Sydney to discuss all things true crime podcasting. This exciting event is open to everyone, but tickets are limited. Just search Bronwyn Live Event to get yours. And we'll be back with more of The Front after this. Leaders of Australia's Jewish communities had high hopes when a national cabinet to tackle anti-Semitism was convened on Tuesday. They've called for the introduction of tougher sentencing for anti-Semitic attackers, stronger hate speech reform, no mask laws at protests, and mandatory anti-Semitism education. The National Cabinet did say it would launch a national database to track these kinds of crimes across jurisdictions, and that the states and territories' attorneys general would collaborate on best practice for prosecutions. But after enduring 13 anti-Semitic incidents in almost as many days, what Australian Jews got was a vague indication that this could all be perpetrated by actors far from our shores. Greg, Anthony Albanese has dodged calls for weeks to convene a national cabinet to tackle anti-Semitism, and now that it's happened, he's largely failed to deliver on the decisive action demanded by Jewish leaders. He's also been criticised by an Israeli MP who says Labor has fuelled the anti-Semitism crisis unfolding in Australia.
The attitude of the current Australian government towards Israel is inflaming a lot of these emotions and it giving, I guess, some acceptance when you do not fight it. Words are not enough. The Jewish community needs actions. I mean, what are they waiting for? For someone to die? For someone to be murdered?
Has he missed the moment here, especially in a week when a ceasefire deal was finally enacted in the Middle East?
The outcome of National Cabinet has been overshadowed by this AFP announcement that they're investigating whether a foreign actor was involved. So that's all sort of gone by the wayside a little bit. You know, there was very little that came out of that National Cabinet. It's typical with this issue. He was flat-footed on it. So I think certainly there'll be expectations more comes out of these National Cabinet meetings when it comes to dealing with anti-Semitism. And as far as the criticism from Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister, I think it's certainly an escalation of the critiques that the Israeli government has made on Australia to suggest that Anthony Albanese's policies, his votes on UN motions that were against Israel's position, suggesting that this is sort of inflamed tensions and that he's not really doing enough to cracking down on it. So these are pretty damaging for Albanese, particularly given he said only a few days ago that his view as the relationship with the ally of Israel has always been good under his government.
This isn't necessarily a political issue, but is this politically damaging for Anthony Albanese and for Labor more broadly?
While the issue of Israel and Palestine and anti-Semitism, I think for most voters is not a frontline issue, I think the fact that we're waking up increasingly and the view is, oh wow, it's another attack, another violent attack. This, I think, does become a law and order issue for people, and that is the frontline issue, particularly for people in areas where crime is increasing, such as Queensland. And Peter Dutton is very much talking up his law and order credentials. And I think just trying to link the Labor brand to issues with crime that are fundamentally state government issues, but just trying to link all this to the government brand, I think it overall can drive this perception that Labor's not the party to keep the community safe. So in that sense, I think that does become a political issue for him.
Greg Brown is the Australian's Canberra Bureau Chief. You can read that story, as well as all the nation's best news, sport, politics and business right now at theaustralian.com.au.